Welcome back to OpenLine. We are talking about a story I did a couple weeks ago about a squatter in Mount Juliet, and getting into the issue of squatters in Tennessee. What are the laws surrounding that? We have with us our legal expert, Leonardo. We're taking your calls. We're also streaming this live on our Facebook page. A lot of comments here on Facebook, and I put on my glasses here so I can read them. Charlotte Taylor Pafford asked, do the banks not check on the houses? I mean, that's essentially what was going on here. This house fell through the cracks. This guy just moved in. So her question, do the banks not check on the houses?
I mean, that's a great question, and of course I'm not in the mortgage industry, but I would think, you know, that all mortgage lenders have such huge housing stock. And I think especially if the property taxes were being paid, maybe it wouldn't come up in their system. You know, I mean, I guess if they had to write a check for $3,700, they might think, okay, you know, so that might trigger somebody, you know, taking a look and figuring out why this thing hasn't sold. But the other thing I've heard about this particular property is that there was a Tennessee Department of Revenue tax lien on the property, and of course that cannot be extinguished by foreclosure, so that therefore increases the price. And who knows, maybe there was a mold problem, maybe you know, that there was a winding road to get there. I don't know the full set of facts, but you would think that they would check that out.
Yeah, but so often they, I guess, fall through the cracks. And I don't even know about so often, but what's amazing to me about this is that it was such a nice house, you know, and I think sometimes maybe there's a house that's kind of abandoned that for whatever reason, I guess the banks have walked away, it just kind of falls into disrepair. This was a gorgeous house. People wanted this house, and yet this happened. And it's in a high profile area. And
I'd be curious to know that the nice couple that we saw in your piece there, I mean, they may have very well had a lawsuit against NationStar for not going through with the closing. And I'm sure they may have spoken with a lawyer, but I would be curious to know why NationStar decided to breach the agreement at the 11th hour, because you know, like you said, it was a nice home, and I'm sure those folks qualified, but they didn't give any reason why. So
this is the last minute. It was just pulled off the market, and they were really frustrated. They were bummed about it.
But if you've ever bought a house, you do know that, you know, closings come down to the wire, and it's fascinating to me. So I think that's indicative of the overall industry sometimes, that it's hard to get information processed. I'm not talking about the closing attorneys. I think they're a victim of it just like the consumers are a lot of times.
Let's go to Lucy on line 2. Hello, Lucy.
Hey, y'all.
Good evening.
I've got a question for the attorney.
Great. Go ahead.
And I don't know if this is covered under squatter or not, but say, for instance, my 95-year-old lady neighbor has a house that's been paid for decades, and her son lives out of state, and she ends up in a nursing home, and the utilities are being paid for or whatnot, and the son doesn't come in, you know, to check on her. Can I go down to the courthouse, or can I just sell her house if it's paid for?
Well, so she would have to, the 90-year-old woman would have to sign over a deed. And so if you were, you know, eager to be charged with perjury or something like that, I mean, you could, you know, you could forge her signature and sell her home, absolutely. But right now, or if she was, I mean, absent doing something illegal, if they didn't have capacity or something like that, or she had suffering from dementia or something like that, you could go and get a conservatorship out of a probate court, and that would allow you to be able to get rid of some assets. But as it stands right now, there would be no way for you to do that unless you engaged in some sort of fraudulent activity, especially with her son being around. I mean, he would be the person that the courts would look to, or a lot of times you see this with a power of attorney. An elderly person gives, say, the neighbor, in this case, Lucy, a power of attorney, and Lucy thinks it's a good idea to sell the house. Well, Lucy could legally sell the house, and there'd be no criminal charges. Of course, it'd probably be a civil lawsuit.
All right, Lucy, thanks for that. Let's go to Evan. Hello, Evan.
Hello?
Go right ahead.
Hey, I knew you at Father Lion. Why can't the police remove a squatter even if they can't find the owner of the property? Because that would happen to me when I was residentially challenged.
Okay. And that question we're seeing on Facebook a lot. So I asked you that one time. We're seeing that a lot. Why can't the police just go in and remove them?
Well, because it's a civil matter, and at this point, I mean, the police could, if I owned that home and he was out there and I was calling the police saying he is trespassing, this is my home, the police would look it up and say, sir, you know, you're trespassing. But if he says, hey, I live here with him, Nick lets me live there, and, you know, then the police would say, Nick, is that true? And I'd say, well, he does live downstairs. And then they would say, well, sir, this is a legal issue. He's not trespassing. He has an interest as a fact that he lives there. So this is a civil matter, and you need to have him evicted. I mean, you know, this is one of the most serious rights that we have, and that is we do respect the rights of people in the abode or in the home. And as unfair as it might seem, a lot of times these laws are designed for the tenants, to protect tenants. And I know a lot of landlords don't like that, but again, that's what they have to do with the legal process. You can't just go in there. If the landlord were to go in there and throw him out, that's a better lawsuit than the eviction ever was. You know?
And what you had in this case, there were residents, and even we interviewed a council person who was really upset, and they kept trying to figure out who was the owner. But you didn't have the owner saying get out. So the owner was the bank, essentially, and the bank didn't know about this situation. So there was no one saying get out. You had all these residents around saying, boy, the property's in poor repair, what's going on here? You had a councilman saying, you know, what's going on here? But the bank wasn't standing up, and that's why the police couldn't just go in and say,
that's right. I mean, if the council person, you know, were to file an eviction, or the mayor, for that matter, file an eviction, they say, Mayor, do you own this house? And he'd say, no, I don't. And they say, well, sir, there's nothing I can do. There's no rights to restore. And so it would take the actual owner, and in your piece it sounds like there was a lot of back and forth on who that actual owner was, so it may have been difficult. I think the thing to do would have been the elected officials, the neighbors, in this case the media, you know, contacting whoever owned the home to make them do what needs to be done, hire a local lawyer in Lebanon, and file this eviction.
All right, let's go to line 1. Is this Gene?
Yes.
Go right ahead.
My question is, say you're already a tenant, but you're a tenant in a family home that's been turned into a rooming house or boarding house, and you could pay your rent by the month or weekly or bi-weekly. Say you're a week late or a week behind on your rent. Does the landlord have the right to tell you to get out the next day and then come in here and throw your stuff out on the street? Would I be considered a squatter if I do not leave
after a week?
Time he say leave?
All right, I'm going to say no, but I'm not a lawyer. All right, this is one of those. I shouldn't jump in here.
No, I mean that's exactly right. Sometimes it's just.
I mean, this is a landlord-tenant issue. All right, I guess how quickly can that become a squatter issue?
Well, a squatter is more of what we would see in your piece. This is a situation where, Gene, I guess you would be considered what's called a holdover tenant. If you don't have a lease or anything like that, at common law, your lease is determined to be a month-to-month tenancy or month-to-month residency. And so to legally get you out of there, they would have to give you a 30-day notice that, you know, on day 31, you're going to be going into court. And you will be evicted if you don't clear up any back rent or anything like that. So I do see, you know, it helps. There's a Uniform Residential Landlord-Tenant Act. You can Google it, the Tennessee Uniform Residential Landlord-Tenant Act. It's not a lot to read, maybe 4 or 5 pages. And if you look at that, you'll see that that's in there. And so a lot of times you'll see tenants come to court and say, I haven't had my 30-day notice. And so at that point in time, they say, well, that's right, you have to have your 30-day notice. And so if there's not a lease that deals with holdover tenancies, which we call what you stay after, you know, the time, and the fact that you're late a week, I mean, that wouldn't be enough. Again, a lot of these leases do cover late fees and the like, but, you know, and what we do see a lot of times is people get called up right when they come to court. They may owe 2 or 3 months back rent, but they come in there on that day 31 or 32 and they have all the money. Not a lot that you can do if there's not damages or other legal activities.
So that is 2 separate things, kind of. I mean,
sure.
What astounds me about this situation is this guy lived there for 2 years. He lived there for over 2 years. I mean, in the story we detailed there was a police report where there was a domestic violence response on the part of police over 2 years ago. There was a theft of property response. It was a vehicle. They went out there for a stolen vehicle. They went to the house. So he'd been there 2 years. How unusual is that for somebody to stay in a house for that long? I
mean, it's very unusual. If you hadn't done the story, it'd probably still be going on. But I mean, think about the liability, though. If he had hurt you, or the photographer, or the producer, that is an incredible lawsuit against NationStar. I mean, think about that. I mean, really? they are the ones who are negligent, not doing what they're supposed to do. That's a heck of a lawsuit. And the people whose car got stolen, I mean, that's still a lawsuit against NationStar because he's fencing stolen property on their property. And whether it's negligence, whether they intentionally know it, whether they just don't care, either way, they're liable. So the liability aspect for me is something I have a hard time with on the lender's part. And we all pay for that in a lot of ways.
Right. And that's fascinating to me too, that it could fall through the cracks. NationStar sent us a statement, as we said in the story. They said, thanks for bringing this to our attention. We are moving quickly to evict the homeowner. I guess not the homeowner. We're moving quickly to evict the people that are in the home. You saw in there, it's more than just the person who came at us with an axe. His name is Jude Piskey. There are other people that live there as well. So they've got to get several people out of there.
Well, and he's not a real friendly guy, too, so I don't imagine there's a lot of neighbors bringing cakes and things over there trying to get to know the guy. It doesn't seem like, you know, he seems like people would keep to themselves and kind of ignore him. And it's absolutely fascinating. It begs the question, or makes me wonder, how much of this is going on in America?
I know.
When we just don't have any idea. I mean, maybe that's, a lot of people do game the system like this, and they're very, very good at it. And maybe he's learned, look, if I pay the property taxes, half the time they're never going to figure out, because there's really no outgo by the lender, right? They have this big bulk insurance policy that they're paying premium zone, and you know, as long as they're not writing property tax checks, it may just not come up for a long period of time.
It's amazing. Yeah. If you know of a situation like this, hit us up on Facebook. You know, comment on Facebook, call us here, whatever. We're going to take a break. There's the number, 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. We'll take a break. Be back right after this.